Old, and welcome back to another episode of Old's Oscar Countdown. And we just had the most impactful weekend in this Oscar season, and I'm here to break it down. What this means for Best Picture, can Sinners really win, and what happened to the acting races, all coming up next. But if you're new to the channel, welcome. This is our 10th season at predicting the Oscars. We have a long history of uploading here to YouTube, talking about our predictions and coming up with very accurate predictions. We gave our SAG Awards predictions a few days ago. Now I want to give my reactions to it before. Later on in the week, I'm going to be giving my final Oscar predictions, with later on next week giving my final predictions for the Oscars. But this was a big one. This really told us a lot about some of these key categories, like the acting categories, like Best Picture. I'm going to break it down, my thoughts, because ultimately I do think we are heading into a really tight race for 3 out of 4 of the acting categories, and also for Best Picture. Really excited to talk about it over the next week here and on this video. And as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know, what did you think of the award show? Did you have correct predictions? Were you right or wrong? Where are you leaning right now? Instant reactions after the Oscars. Of course, we'll have a week or so, a couple weeks now, to debrief and try to figure out what's going to ultimately win at the Oscars. Although Oscar voting closes in just a few days, so this is a real crucial time these next few days for Academy member voters to make their final selections, and for us, of course, to try to predict what that's going to be. But I want to structure this video as a sort of state of the race. Talk about 5 categories, Best Picture in the 4 acting categories, and talk about how the Producers Guild Awards, which happened on Saturday, and then just most recently the Actors Awards, formerly known as the SAG Awards, how that ultimately affects the categories as well, because those are really 2 key industry awards, and we always want to look at those industry awards even more so than things like the Golden Globes or Critics' Choice, because you have actual Academy member voters voting on the Oscars. Now, it's not a 1-to-1 exact ratio, but oftentimes we see groups like the SAG Awards, Actors Awards, or things like PGA be very accurate. So let's talk about the state of the race. Let's talk about Best Picture. And this really, after the 2 award shows, confirms to me what I always thought since the nominations, which is that it is a real race between One Battle After Another and Sinners. I think if One Battle won the ensemble at the Actors Awards, it would be a closed case. One Battle would clearly win Best Picture. Very few films would go on to win all of those awards and then not ultimately win Best Picture. But Sinners showed a sign of life, also with that surprise win for Michael B. Jordan, and even a surprise win, you'd say, for Wunmi Mosaku. There is a strong case still for Sinners to win Best Picture, and in many ways the 2 films are similar. You have a lot of nominations for each, you have acting support and technical support for each. Both of them are probably going to win a screenplay prize, so it comes down to a couple of key categories that can go either way. And some people, I don't think this is necessarily a 50-50 race where either or could win. This is maybe more of a 70-30 race or 60-40 race, with One Battle After Another being the favorite, and I'll explain why now. So you have One Battle. The important thing was that it won the Producers Guild Awards just last weekend. This is really crucial because over the last 10 years, at the Producers Guild Awards, they have overlapped with the Oscars Best Picture category 7 of the last 10 years. So more often than not, whatever wins at the Producers Guild Awards ends up winning at the Oscars. In part because they use a preferential ballot, but we don't need to go into too much detail. The point being is they're a very accurate group at predicting Best Picture for the Oscars. So the fact that One Battle After Another won there is a huge sign of support. Then you look at other things, non-industry awards and critics groups. They've kind of rallied behind One Battle After Another. Televised critics awards like Golden Globes or Critics' Choice Awards gave it to One Battle. Even another industry award like BAFTA, which doesn't have the same voting system as the Oscars, but it won for Best Film there. The only place it lost out on, of course, here was at the Actors Awards, and it didn't lose out in a Best Picture category. It lost out in a Best Ensemble category, which does make a little bit of sense. It is not an ensemble-focused movie. It's usually like, Jason Finney and Leonardo DiCaprio one-on-one, or Leonardo DiCaprio and Benicio del Toro one-on-one. It's rare for all of them to all be in the same scene at the same time, versus Sinners, where so many of the actors are in scenes together, in particular that second half of the film. They're all kind of together, so it makes sense a little bit more so as an ensemble type of a film. So One Battle After Another still has pretty much every key industry group that it needs to win, except for SAG. The good news, or the one thing that maybe would scare One Battle After Another fans, would be that pretty much every single time that the PGAs got it wrong, in which they predicted a movie and the Oscars went something with somewhere else, it almost always was the SAG Ensemble winner, and it was SAG Ensemble as the key predictor. So 2 examples being The Big Short in 2015, that's who the producers went with. Ultimately, it was the SAG Ensemble winner, SAG, which went on to win Best Picture. Same thing in 2019, Parasite wins SAG and nothing else, and ultimately wins Best Picture at the Oscars, whereas 1917, was the winner there at PGA. The one example where it didn't happen, where PGA was wrong and SAG was wrong, was 2016 with the Moonlight win. But I think what's indicative is that, something like La La Land doesn't even get nominated for SAG Ensemble. Same thing with 1917, doesn't get even nominated for SAG Ensemble, and then ultimately loses out. So if One Battle After Another were to lose, what's it going to lose to? Almost always tells us it's the SAG Ensemble winner, which in this case is Sinners. And I mentioned they're very similar because they have those screenplay awards. They have potentially an acting award win as well. And those are the 2 key categories needed to win Best Picture. You usually have to have an acting award win. You usually have to have a screenplay award win. The slight difference of why I lean One Battle After Another as a favorite, though, is that I think it has more of a guarantee of an acting win, with Sean Penn having won both BAFTA and SAG. Whereas Michael B. Jordan and Wunmi Mosaku may both win, but are a little bit, I think, on rockier grounds. It's not a 100% guarantee necessarily. And then you look at some of the other categories. I think One Battle After Another is a slight favorite in the category like editing over a movie like Sinners. Same thing with cinematography. So that's an important factor as well, where sometimes One Battle is doing well in these kind of industry groups for below the line categories, winning at things like the Art Directors Guild or the Costume Designers Guild in weaker categories, mind you, but still notable wins there. And then, of course, I think Paul Thomas Anderson is the frontrunner to win for Best Director, having won the DGA and pretty much every other directing prize. So there's 2 things that can be true. I think Sinners is a very strong Best Picture contender. It may win. It may have just gone up against this huge behemoth of a film in something like One Battle After Another. But is it a guarantee? No, it is not. You have Sinners, 16 nominations, most of all time at the Oscars, which indicates wide industry support. It has a lot of acting support. The Brits love Wunmi Mosaku, gave it her BAFTA. The Americans with SAG actors, AFTRA, gave it Best Ensemble and Michael B. Jordan. That's important because we know that the acting in Sinners is beloved. The actors are the biggest branch of the Academy, so it has widespread support. It has a lot of acting support. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if Sinners did end up winning Best Picture. That being said, it is going up against a real juggernaut in One Battle After Another, which has a little bit more of a guarantee in an acting win, has the PGA win, has the director win probably locked up, has the BAFTA win, has a very similar profile to Sinners, except is just slightly has the edge in a lot of those key categories. Will be very interesting going into the Oscar race. I think Sinners needed to win Best SAG Ensemble to continue to be a major contender, but it did win, and that means to me it is still a major contender. Like I said, not 50-50, who knows who's going to win, maybe more like 70-30 or 60-40 with One Battle being the favorite, but not a win that I'm guaranteeing is going to happen. It will be exciting to go into Oscars night with this kind of debate going back and forth. And now let's talk about the Best Actor category, which was the surprise of the night. Michael B. Jordan ended up winning at the Actors Awards, which means he is the frontrunner right now to win the Oscar. I think really surprised a lot of people, but you have to look at the facts and where they stand. I know myself, I was doubting if he was even going to get nominated. Now he may actually win the Oscar, so a huge kind of a turnaround from my personal thoughts of how I was seeing this race, but he has overperformed. And the reason why he's the frontrunner right now, and the way I see it, and not necessarily I'm guaranteeing, predicting him, but he is the frontrunner, is because when we look at the acting categories, the 2 main award shows that we look at are the Actors Awards and BAFTA. Well, at BAFTA, Chalamet and Michael B. Jordan were both nominated, right? But both of them lost to someone who's not even nominated at the Oscars. So we kind of have to throw that one out. We don't really know what's going to happen. BAFTA did their own kind of weird thing. Okay, let's look at the Actors Awards. Fine. Who was nominated? Michael B. Jordan and Timothée Chalamet. They went up against each other. And who won? Michael B. Jordan. Who's in the stronger film? Michael B. Jordan. So I think for a lot of us, particularly if you're really close to the Oscar season, you get sometimes things stuck in your head and you think that's a clear winner. And I thought that similarly with someone like a Chalamet, winning the Golden Globe, winning Critics' Choice, kind of doing his movie star persona and willing this to a kind of box office hit domestically. Everything was trending to seem like Chalamet was the frontrunner to win for Best Lead Actor. But then, as we mentioned in our BAFTA reactions video, there was no reason for him to lose at BAFTA. That was a sign, an early sign, that he doesn't have that international support. And if he doesn't have that international support, Does he also have American support? Because he just lost out to Michael B. Jordan in Sinners. Now, is Michael B. Jordan an absolute lock? No. I mean, he did lose at the BAFTA as well, Chalamet, to Robert Aramayo, so he doesn't have this massive sign of support. He lost the Golden Globe to Wagner Moura, so there is some clear signs, I think, of the lack of international support for Michael B. Jordan. We know that the Academy has become increasingly more international in recent years, so are they going to go behind his performance? Doesn't necessarily seem like it right now, but then who are they going to go behind? Are they going to go behind Wagner Moura? Maybe, but why wasn't he even nominated at BAFTA Moura? Does he have maybe Brazilian support and South American support, but maybe not, English support? And that, is a branch of the Academy which is important. He also doesn't have American support, wasn't nominated at the actors. And then what about Chalamet? Does he have international support? Well, it hasn't really come out in a lot of international places, the film Marie Supreme, so not necessarily there. He didn't win at BAFTA, so there's some concerns overall. Frankly, this is a really tough category to predict because we really only have the one industry award that we can kind of look at, and that being at the Actors Awards, and Michael B. Jordan won. Therefore, I think he is the front runner. What I think is also important too, and what I think we should try to look at, is the critics groups and the critics prizes. Michael B. Jordan is essentially tied with Timothée Chalamet in terms of most critics groups prizes and kind of these precursor prizes. Now, Chalamet does have a couple of more, but it is a lot closer versus something like Amy Madigan, who has over 30 precursor wins, and number 2, I believe, is Wunmi Mosaku, who's in the teens. Like Amy Madigan, as an example, is the clear critics' favorite. Same thing with Jessie Buckley, the clear critics' favorite. Whereas someone like Chalamet versus Michael B. Jordan, it is a much tighter race. And I mention that just because in recent years, in the 2020s, the Oscars have been leaning towards more of critics' prizes and critics' groups. As a matter of fact, if you look at the top kind of 2 contenders that get the most critics' prizes in all the acting categories, it's only happened 3 times in which the Oscar winner wasn't in the top 2 of critics' prizes, that being Will Smith for King Richard, Anthony Hopkins for The Father, and Jamie Lee Curtis for Everything Everywhere All at Once. That's just to say, most of the time, the 4 acting categories in the past 5 years usually are in number 1 for most critics' prizes or number 2 for most critics' prizes. They usually win a lot of those kind of key industry precursors. Well, Michael B. Jordan is number 2, almost tied with Timothée Chalamet. So there are 2 ways to look at this. I think some people will look at this and go, okay, this was a weird SAG thing. Michael B. Jordan has no chance at the Oscars. And I think that's wrong. I think he absolutely has a chance. I think he's actually the favorite probably going in to the Oscars. But then there's the other side of things where I think some people think, okay, Michael B. Jordan won here. He's definitely winning at the Oscars. And that's not the case at all, I don't think. He only has Actors Awards. Why didn't he, win at BAFTA? Why didn't he win at the Golden Globes? Does he have international support? We know the Actors Awards have maybe a little bit of an appreciation of twin performances. It wasn't that long ago on the TV side of things where Mark Ruffalo had a bit of a surprise win for I Know This Much Is True, or even going back to Tatiana Maslany on the TV side getting nominated for Orphan Black. There is an appreciation for these kind of twin-like performances with the actors. It's a little bit more of a showy thing that the actors appreciate. Will the Academy, will the entire Academy, guys like cinematographers or editors, will they appreciate that style of performance? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. You could also say that Chalamet was never going to win here because he just won last year and SAG voters wanted to do something differently. But of course they're going to vote for him at the Academy, right? So there's kind of 2 things, kind of a smoke and a stack of how to interpret things. On one hand, if you're saying Michael B. Jordan has no chance, I think you're wrong. But if you're saying Michael B. Jordan is an absolute lock, I also think you're wrong. I think this is a very difficult category to ultimately dissect. I think because Michael B. Jordan is the only actor nominated at the Oscars that has at least one industry award win, that being the Actors Award. He is the de facto favorite going into the Oscars, but it is going to be a really tough category to predict, and we have no other kind of signs to look at right now. Chalamet at one point was maybe the clear favorite, but having lost BAFTA, having lost here, he is as a real threat to lose at the Oscars, and it will be very interesting to see what happens there. The one thing, though, that I will warn you when making your arguments and making your predictions to try to stay away from is to lead into the stats and don't lead into reaction. I think I've seen a lot of people online already, and I just want to kind of warn people, go, man, Michael B. Jordan had a lot of cheers in the room. And don't be fooled by that. Lily Gladstone had a lot of cheers the year she won. Demi Moore last year had a lot of cheers in the room. It seemed like they loved her. Both of them ultimately didn't win at the Oscars. So If you're going to vote for Michael B. Jordan and ultimately predict him, I think that's a totally fine and probably smart prediction. Winning SAG, having a strong film, there's a lot of things going for him, right? But don't make the argument of, you know what, they seem like they really loved him in the room. That's a fool's gold. We've been around here for 10 years. We've seen that fail many times because this is an academy that's really expanded, 10,000 members. Don't be fooled by one award show had a big reaction to him in a room of about, 200 or so people. Don't conflate that with overall passion within the academy. That's the one thing I just want to kind of leave you with. Choose Chalamet, choose Ethan Hawke, choose Mora, choose MBJ, just whatever you do. Don't base your prediction based on, man, they really liked him or didn't like him in the room. That's the subjective stuff that can get you lost at the Oscars predicting. Try to stick to the facts, try to stick to historical patterns. That's been working for us for 10 years, and I'm not going to go away with it now. But let's talk about the Best Supporting Actress category. Amy Madigan ends up winning at the Actors Awards, and I think solidifies herself as the probable frontrunner, although this is, I think, of the three acting categories, the most up in the air, the most confusing. I'm of two minds of this. I think, on one hand, I'm going, Amy won here. This is a big win. She's probably the front runner. The Actors Awards are very accurate at predicting, particularly the Supporting Actress category. I'm going to lean Amy Madigan. We're also going, well, Connor, you predicted Amy Madigan was going to win because you know that the actors appreciate narratives. So you shouldn't be surprised that Amy Madigan won here. And frankly, I'm not, because I predicted it. But also, trying to understand the differences between the Oscars. The Oscars don't necessarily love narratives as much as the actors do. It would make sense why Amy Madigan would win here, but then maybe lose out on the Oscars. So just like the Best Actor category, I'm conflicted. I look at it, Amy Madigan, and go, this is a big win. Absolutely. I thought she gave a really kind of funny, charming speech and made her very likable. This is an award show just a few days before the end of Oscar voting, so people who haven't voted for her maybe be swayed by her performance. But then you also go, she is definitely not a clear winner. She didn't even get nominated at BAFTA. Why is that? Does she lack, international support? Some may say, well, she would have won BAFTA if she had been nominated. Well, why didn't she get nominated in the first place? I kind of go in the other way. I think there's a real lack of overall maybe international support for her, and that concerns me, not being able to get even nominated at BAFTA. Then you look at her film. She's a sole nominee, which was kind of surprising. Going into Oscar nominations morning, a lot of people had, and totally reasonable predictions, by the way, nominations for weapons in picture, in screenplay, in casting, in editing. It didn't get any of them. It just got Amy Madigan. So how much does the Academy really like weapons? I don't necessarily know they really do like the movie. Right? So then there's confusion there. But then Amy Madigan has the critics' prizes and critics' support. We just talked about how important that is overall. The Oscars usually go with the top two critics' award winners. And then who's the alternative? I think maybe number 2 would be Wumi Misako. Of course, she won at BAFTA. She's in the strong film in something like Sinners. But then you go, okay, well, what about Tiana Taylor in One Battle After Another? If you think One Battle After Another is going to win Best Picture, theoretically it's the slightly stronger film than Sinners. But then why did Tiana Taylor only win at the Golden Globes? Why didn't she win at BAFTA or at the Actors Awards? In particular, with someone like Tiana Taylor, if you look at the acting categories, it is very rare for an actor to not win at BAFTA, not win at SAG, and then go on to win at the Oscars. Now, in the Supporting Actress category, it actually happened relatively recently in 2018 with Regina King for If Beale Street Could Talk. But if you want to look at the other 3 acting categories, Supporting Actor, Actor, and Actress, you have to go back to 1999 for Best Actress to have a winner that doesn't win in both SAG and BAFTA that went on at the Oscars. Same thing with Actor, 2003 with Sean Penn and Mystic River. Yeah, same thing with Supporting Actor, 2005 with Syriana. I mean, you have to go 20 plus years in the other 3 acting categories to see that happen. Now, like I mentioned, it is a little bit more common in something like Supporting Actress. It just happened in 2018 with Regina King, but it's a rarity. So Tiana Taylor, who was maybe the frontrunner at one point, now is starting to look like, well, I'm not exactly too sure about her because she didn't win at BAFTA. She didn't win at the Actors. Why not? But then there is maybe no clear contender right now. I guess maybe I lean Amy Madigan, but it really does concern me that she doesn't have that international support. And we know the Academy has become so international that maybe I lean Wunmi Masaku. It's another category like the Best Actor category where there are so many permutations. It's going to be really tough going into Oscars night. What's going to happen there? But it's going to be exciting to talk about nonetheless, and I'd love to hear your thoughts truthfully in the comments down below. Where are you leaning? Where are the stats that I'm maybe not overlooking? I kind of look at one thing and I get disproven by another stat. It may be just one of those categories, but at least with Best Actor, I think it's probably going to be MBJ or Chalamet versus something like Best Supporting Actress. It could be any of the kind of top three, maybe even the sentimental value women, but I don't think so. But it could be really generally either of those top three contenders win for Best Supporting Actors, and I wouldn't be shocked at all. Now let's talk about the Best Supporting Actor category, which a couple of weeks ago was really up in the air. And then I mentioned in my BAFTA reactions video, I thought Sean Penn winning there was a huge sign of support, that was a place that Stellan Skarsgård needed to win in order for him to be a major contender at the Oscars. And yet Penn wins there, he wins the Actors Awards, and now all of a sudden he is the kind of clear favorite, even more so than the Best Actor category, which would have been surprising, just 2 weeks ago if you had told me that. But as we mentioned in our SAG predictions video, taking a kind of 100-foot bird's eye view of things, it kind of makes sense. It is a villainous role. We know that villainous roles usually do well in getting Oscars in the supporting acting categories. Think of J.K. Simmons in Whiplash. Think of Heath Ledger for Joker. Think of Joaquin Phoenix for Joker, right? And then you say, well, Sean Penn is really well liked. He can be somewhat of a controversial figure, but he has won 2 Oscars before. He is well liked within the Academy. That's important. Oh yeah, and then he's in maybe the Best Picture winner, one of the year's most critically acclaimed films. He has the second most amount of screen time right behind Leonardo DiCaprio. So he's in a lot of one of the most well-liked movies of the year, in a kind of a character archetype from a past 2-time winner. And if anything, him not showing up to BAFTAs or the Actors Awards is a good thing. We saw Frances McDormand in 2020 do a similar kind of non-campaigning style that the actors and the Academy ultimately liked. That kind of ability to not really try like you're trying to win is sometimes a positive strategy. And you could say if Sean Penn did show up and say something really controversial at the award shows, people would be hesitant to vote for him. So in a way, it is kind of a smart strategy for Penn not to show up at these award shows. But frankly, having won BAFTA, having won the Actors Awards, being connected to the potential Best Picture winner is enough for me to, I think, ultimately give him the edge and make sure that he is the clear favorite, I think, going into Oscars night. And then to end things off, Jessie Buckley won the Actors Award for Best Actress, and she is the clear frontrunner to win for Best Actress at the Oscars, has won all of the critics' prizes, has won all the televised critics' prizes, has won all the industry awards, connection to a really strong film, and in my opinion, a deserving winner. I'm glad to see her ultimately win. Is there a possibility of an upset? Not really. It's really the only of the 4 acting categories I'm almost 100% guaranteed that she is going to win. But what an exciting year that we have 3 out of the 4 acting categories where I'm going to have to debate and talk about things and mull things over. But that's why you should stay subscribed to the channel. Check out my video probably next week, Wednesday, or next week Tuesday. We're going to see. I am going to have a video next week Monday on 7 potential upsets to talk about some potential categories that maybe we're not looking at too much, to kind of predict an upset before it happens. Excited to talk about that, but ultimately we're at the home stretch of things. We've had all the big award shows. I'm going to be giving my full predictions in just a little over a week's time, and then the Oscars happen, and then we're going to be starting a new series after that. But like I mentioned at the top of this video, please feel free. Let me know your predictions. Let me know where you're leaning. I want to create a fun-loving Oscar community here in the comments, so please feel free to do that. But that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.